Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my build, the Rage Mage. Now, this character, I am using a few of the new items, a few of the changed items. I'm going to go into that. So to start things off with, the main key piece I wanted to build around when I was making this character was Ravenous Passion. This helmet allows you to generate rage based on spending 200 mana. Now, you don't have to do this in one cast. You can do it in a lot of smaller casts. Like, for example, if you spend 20 mana, but you cast 10 times a second, you'll be generating 15 rage a second because you will be spending 200 mana a second. So you'll see here, I have a skill that costs 600 mana. I use it once and it gives me 15 rage. I use it again, it gives me another 15 rage, so on and so forth. This also works with things like Arcane Cloak, which I have on automation, but I have it turned off right now, just so it isn't spamming the automation while I'm going over the various key pieces of the character. So this allows us to generate rage. This is beneficial for a few big reasons. Reason number one is gives you cast speed and percent damage, which is pretty decent. But the bigger, more important reason is it gives you a very high uptime on Berserk. And by very high, I mean better than most other builds could possibly muster. Now, this buff, it does not give you more damage with your spells, doesn't give you more cast speed. Those two things do not apply to our cast speed benefits. If they did, it would be even crazier. But mainly the important thing about Berserk is it gives us about 20% less damage taken, which is very strong, and B, it gives us 30% movement speed. It's something where if you have good uptime on Berserk, there's a reason why Calm Spirit were so popular in the previous leagues, because movement speed, it's just hard to beat. This character right now, I don't have a Mage Blood on it, but I did get a Mage Blood at some point this league and had it on a leveling character at some point. And this character feels faster than that character did, just because the combination of rage and very high uptime on Quicksilver, and on top of that, we also have a really fast cast speed, Frostbolt of Wintry Blast, which ends up being quite something in terms of like abilities to go like traverse a distance pretty quickly. Now, that is Ravenous Passion. The other things I'm using this that are new items that I really like is number 2 is Soul Ascension. This is a changed unique that essentially got a buff to it's how many stacks it could gain overall, like its total maximum depending on the role, and B, how fast you gain the stacks. Now, I used to always kind of like meme on this item and say stuff like, oh, Ziz got screwed on his Uber unique. It's not very good. It takes forever to ramp. I have to say, after using it now with this update where it's no more than once every 0.5 seconds, honestly, these feel pretty dang good to play with. You get rage generated Soul Eater stacks pretty quickly throughout the map. If you saw that showcase of the Phoenix, we actually had by the end of it 30 plus Soul Eater stacks, and we got above 10 pretty quickly throughout the map. I would say, personally, from using these so far, ultimately, it's pretty hard for me to let them go now that I've tried them out. Because honestly, how many stacks do you need before they start being a very competitive glove slot? I'd say like 10 stacks. 10 stacks is 50% cast speed. That starts being a really large amount. But it can go all the way up to 55, I believe, if you have a max roll of this, or 40 stacks or whatever. You're talking about getting up to 200 cast speed as you're ramping throughout the map. It feels good. And it's not just cast speed, it's also attack speed. So if you're like leap slamming around, you could be zooming up your leap slam as well, which would feel really good on a character using leap slam or shield charge as their movement. I, of course, am using Wintry Frostblink, and when I'm getting the Soul Eater stacks, you could see that we were really cooking. We could just cast and it would just zip us somewhere really fast. And I have to admit, I was wrong about these. I always memed on them. I thought they weren't that good, but after using them, I actually really like them, and I'll probably use them more in the future because the ramp time is a lot better than it used to be, and it starts to feel pretty good pretty fast because it's just a large source of cast speed that you can't get much elsewhere. I think on this character, I have a lot of cast speed investment. I have cast speed on all my rings. I have cast speed on my wands. Well, I would have had cast speed on here, but let's just say the non-mirrored version of this, I missed the annul a few times because I was trying to annul that mana gain and craft a cast speed. But that's besides the point. We have cast speed on all those sources. We also are running a Sublime Vision haste, specifically just because I want to go fast. Sublime Vision plus haste means 10% action speed, and it also means you have a haste aura with a bunch of extra increased effect on it between the Sublime Vision and between using it with Eternal Blessing, which gives another 24% speed. So from this haste, we're getting something close to 40% cast speed and almost 30% movement speed or whatever it is. Not quite that much, a little bit less. But the point is, we're designing this character to go fast. So we have action speed haste, cast speed from haste, cast speed on all the gear pieces we can get it. And I didn't end up getting as much cast speed on the tree as I would have liked. I pretty much only have like this here, a bit here. And I was originally going to be taking some of these nodes, but I ended up swapping for just getting a little bit tankier. If you want to go higher damage, you can go these nodes, and there's also these clusters down here, which are pretty good. But I decided to opt out of those to go a little bit more defensive in terms of like getting lucky suppress. Right now we have 45 suppress with lucky, which is like, I don't know, 60 something, 70% chance to suppress, which is okay. Ultimately, I think to improve this, I'd like to get rare boots instead of skyforth with suppress on it, but that is something that I never got around to. As for why am I wearing skyforths, it basically is just to solve stun. This gives you a stun threshold based on 5% or 500% of your mana. It's a stun threshold as if we were like a 50k life character, and that's the reason for skyforths. Ultimately, when you're playing a mana build, one of the big problems you're going to run into is, how do I deal with stun? Now, one answer is to go unwavering stance. I've actually started to not like this answer at all. I've begun to believe that evasion is very, very strong in this game, even when you don't have a lot of it. Like, for example, I only have 5k evasion. This is just from this one mastery here, these two nodes, and having a Cloak of Defiance. And 36% chance to evade damage is a massive amount of additional tank towards attacks. Whether or not you think so or not is a different story, but I have begun to veer away from unwavering stance because I just feel like even just a little bit of evasion, if you can start putting in like blind or put in some other things as well, maybe if I could fit in a dread banner on this build, which I can't because I'm doing supply vision, but the point is I start to not like unwavering stance, so I like things like Skyforce more now. But ultimately, I think the best in slot for this build would probably be rare boots, and then using something like an immutable. Now, speaking of why I didn't do that to start off with, originally when I was making this character, my plan was to do a Incinerate character with the new Incinerate venting. Unfortunately, that one it ran into one very big problem, and the one very big problem it had is, in order for me to sustain the cost of the skill, because Incinerate is a much faster casting skill, I had to use something like Inspiration. And that is fine. I like that plenty fine because Inspiration does give you some damage. The problem is it comes with a very big downside, which is it makes a really annoying noise. If you've ever used Ralakesh before they made the change, you would remember that if you moved and stopped moving, you get the replay of the, essentially the quite annoying, charge removal mod. So I'm going to just go over here. I'm going to go grab Inspiration real quick. I think I have one just sitting around. Yep, we have a level. Let's just do this low level one just to demonstrate the point. And in order to get to the point of me being able to sustain Rage Incinerate, I needed a higher reduced cost, because the way it works now is Archmage gives you damage based on how much total mana on your reserve you have, regardless of the cost. So the idea is you want to reduce the cost quite a bit, so that way you can still deal a heavy amount of damage. Now, this now works with channeling skills, which is, I think, a pretty strong thing, because that gives a lot of flat damage to a channeling skill like Incinerate, because normally you couldn't do a Archmage plus Incinerate due to the high cost, but now you can reduce the cost as much as possible. So for example, we'd be putting on Inspiration, we'd be grabbing some more reduced costs from Righteous Decree, and what ended up happening is, essentially, here, I'll just play it for you. That is the sound of Inspiration charges being essentially added and removed, added and removed, added and removed. Now, now, essentially what that meant is, for me to do Incinerate Venting, I had to get away without using Inspiration support. And that was a problem that ended up costing more passives than I thought was really legitimately worth it. And I think it ended up being like a 10 to 15 passive investment to start trying to make it work, which is, I think at that point, making Incinerate a whole lot less worth using. And it was doing things like Militant Faith. If we put this in here, we get a bunch of reduced mana costs due to all the devotion in this area. You see we go to 220 devotion, which is 22% reduced mana cost. You get channeling skill damage. There were some benefits. But the thing is, I had to force in Militant Faith, which lost me a bunch of mana, right? Right now, this Brandis Pact is giving me close to 1,000 mana by itself, just from this area with the Unnatural Instinct. But then also, I was grabbing basically all the reduced cost nodes here. I had to grab all the reduced cost nodes here. And it added up pretty dang quickly in terms of investment that was making it hard for my character to feel like I was making the right financial choice, or whatever you want to call it. So, originally started out as Incinerate. That was the issue, was the Inspiration charge thing. I had a hard time. Well, I didn't want to, one, I didn't want to listen to that noise. It was way too annoying. And then two, if I didn't want to listen to that noise, it was going to cost me more than I thought using Incinerate was worth. So I ended up trying a few different skills like Lightning Conduit of the Heavens, Shock Nova here, which we have on right now, and also Voltaxic Burst we did in Hoover Shaper with just as something to do as a meme. This skill is really, don't play it. But anyways, Lightning Conduit of the Heaven and Shock Nova feel pretty dang good for clear. They're not the highest single target skills, like Lightning Conduit of the Heavens I think of more as like a clear feels good skill. So I'll showcase that, and I'll also showcase Shock Nova for a little bit of this Hydra we're going to do here. I think that covers most of the unique interactions of the build. Outside of that, we are playing a Archmage character, as I said before, basically trying to get a bunch of mana, and then that big glob of mana gives us about 20% of our mana pool as flat lightning damage. So we see here, skills gain added damage equal to 19% of unreserved maximum mana, which means we get close to 2k flat lightning, which is a very large amount when you're adding it onto a skill that deals about, on average, 1300, and then you add 2k flat, which gets multiplied by the damage effectiveness. It like 6x's the damage or something like that. Ultimately, I don't think this character is like super well min-maxed. I don't think it's like necessarily completely OP or anything like that. I just think it's a pretty fun character to play. I just like zooming around. I had some fun playing it. I'm probably going to make some other builds because a lot of ideas I have in my head I want to make. But I wanted to share this. And outside of the cast speed stuff, we did go for Onslaught on one of the rings. I'll go over the ring craft real quick for those of you who are wondering how to craft rings like this. It's a pretty simple process. Essentially, it is Essence of Misery gives you mana regenerate, and you're doing that until you either hit good chaos res or good cast speed. And once you hit one or the other, then you need to annul off the extra bad mod and do a Substitutes Can't Be Changed Reforge Caster, which gives you a 1 and 3 to hit cast speed if you already have chaos res on it. Or if you hit cast speed, you need to do Substitutes Can't Be Changed Reforge Chaos, which gives you 1 and 6 to hit T1 chaos res, or you can just settle for like T2 or whatever. And then doing a Veiled Chaos to unveil life and benchcraft the reduced mana cost, and you're good to go. That's the ring craft. Outside of that, the other ring I just bought off trade for 1 divine. I did a little weighted Sun Church with some mana and chaos res and cast speed and search for those stats essentially. And outside of that, the other gear we crafted, we did one crafting through the graveyard. Basically, for these, I'd recommend one. You want to add up to 2 affixes. You want to make it so mana is more common, and you want and you want to make chaos, physical, elemental, attack mods, make all those scarcer. I did about 1000% scarcer on all the mods I didn't want to show up, and then I made mana and speed more common. Ultimately, I think I did too much of a mana multiplier on this because I got mana gained on kill on every single wand. I forgot mana gained on kill was a thing. And if I was to do it again, I'd probably prioritize caster a little bit more, maybe prioritize some speed. That being said, you can hit proj speed as well, which is another mod you don't technically want. So that's my recommendations for wands, is go for mana, percent damage, percent crit, mana regen, cast speed. And then if you have flat lightning, that's okay. Flat fire would be probably fine. Flat cold would be probably fine. They're not really great mods. You'd rather want the percent damage. But the main important thing is you want items with high mana. And to do that, you just go Necropolis, you jack up the mod rating, and then you make all the mods you don't want a little bit scarcer, and then do some increases for mana, speed, caster, stuff like that. All right, so that goes over the character for most of the gear pieces. Let's talk about, real quick, I want to talk about unique jewels and what I'm doing for jewel setups. I'm not sure this is optimized or this is good, but I'm going to go over it anyways. I thought it was kind of cute, thought it worked out pretty decently, which is I'm using a Thread of Hope, and you're wondering why I'm grabbing these small nodes along with a Pure Talent. This jewel right here gives you stats based on having a connection to the starting node, and it does work if you use a Thread of Hope like this and grab the starting nodes like this. So essentially what ends up happening here is I have the starting node Scion, starting node Templar, starting node Shadow, starting node Witch, which makes Pure Talent give 0.5% regen, 0.5 base crit, 25 all attributes, and 5 pen. So that's what's going on there with the Thread of Hope Pure Talent combo. And then I'm using an Unnatural Instinct in combination with a Parandis Pact. As far as Unnatural Instincts go, I am convinced if you're ever playing a mana build, this is almost universally always the correct choice to do a Unnatural Instinct here. Gives you a lot of percent mana, gives you nice AoE, gives you cast speed, and it just usually feels like the right play to do something like this. And then combining it with a Parandis Pact here, this new jewel, I think is really cool. You could also go for maybe percent damage here if you wanted to scale higher single target. That's up to you how you want to do it, but Parandis Pact gives a lot of flat mana from all the nodes you have grabbed and the nodes from Unnatural Instinct that have flat mana on them. All right, that is the jewels. And also last, Sublime Vision, just because I want to go fast. I think the biggest thing I'm missing right now is I have bad mitigation for freeze and or not for shock. I don't have a good way to deal with shock. I don't have a good way to deal with yeah, it's pretty much just shock. We have freeze immune, we have some chill reduction, both those work. We have the Ralakesh, which in my opinion essentially just deals with bleed outright. I think once you put this on, you just stop dying to bleed. Can highly recommend it. I'm using it on basically every character now, and I have ceased to remember what it's like to die to bleed for the most part. And outside of that, we also have am I spacing on something? Oh, Ignite. I don't usually feel like Ignite's too dangerous. Generally, if you have like high res and decent sustain, Ignite usually isn't a problem. And for our character specifically, we have 81 max all res, which brings me to my new favorite Mage Blood at Home budget item that I'm going to recommend in a lot of builds because it's just really freaking strong. Essentially what this allows you to do is if you grab res flasks with reduced charges or charge recovery and then some additional stats, you can get away with essentially permanent uptime and solve needing res on most of your gear pieces. You'll notice my gear has almost no res on it outside of a little bit of chaos res. Between this and I believe we might have res on a couple nodes here and here, we basically cap, and you can have close to permanent uptime. Essentially with these mods, if you have some flask quality on it, they should feel pretty decent. The way it works is eventually they will run out. They'll have like, they'll go through like 7 cycles or 8 cycles without getting any charges where they'll last that long. And essentially the way it works is I call it practical uptime, which is if you're playing the game, they're never going to go down. If you're killing monsters, adding a little bit of extra charges into the game, you're never going to run out of these flasks. As well as if you're fighting a boss, you're going to generate charges and they're never going to run out. On top of that, we just have a little bit of a safety net here, as I have the chance to gain flash charge on crit. I have that here just as a little bit of extra sustain, but outside that, I think if you have those sorts of things, like if you're just playing the game, these 3 charges per second plus charge recovery and reduced charges used on res flasks should lead to relatively high uptime. You'll see they finally went down after that explanation. But the idea is if you're mapping and stuff, they're just not going to run out of charges. And I really, really like this belt because it allows you to have A, high uptime on good flasks that have some flask effect, and B, it also works with unique flasks, so you get some flask effect on if you were using things like Progenesis or you're using things like Bottle of Faith. All tied to time, I think is a very strong, belt for the cost. I think with a utility roll, it's like 3 or 4 divines if you have a utility roll of 3 on it. Yeah, so I can highly recommend this belt. I'm a big fan of it now, and having tried it. I think that's pretty much everything on the character. Let's go ahead and, oh, one more thing, Leech. We are sustaining through Leech on Life and ES as well as Mana Regen. Those are how we're sustaining our pools. So we have Life Leech from Doriani's Lessons, Spell Leech from Light Eater, and then we combine that with Instant Leech and a very fast cast time is usually how we're sustaining our Life and ES pool, and it works pretty well. Okay, now I think I'm done talking about the nodes. I think we are good to go ahead and do a map. I'm going to showcase Lightning Convoy Heavens, which is not a good single target skill, so bear in mind this is going to be lower single target than the other choices, but I have to say whenever I play with the skill, I'm just impressed with how good it feels to play, because it drops a lot of thought process of thinking about what you have to aim at. Now we have overkill AoE with Hyro, thanks to this node here, 100% AoE from Sanctuary Thought. I also have AoE here and AoE here. I will say the AoE is probably overkill, but even if you had bad AoE, Lightning Conduit Heavens would feel pretty good to clear with. You'll see we, where are the enemies at? Anyways, when you're clearing, it's essentially just like, you're targeting an area where it will strike down lightning, and then it just thunders down, hits up to, I think, 20 targets or something like that. And essentially what that usually means, okay, Soul Eater is like 90% damage reduction now. Did you guys hear about this? Soul Eater's an insane damage reduction. You run into the Soul Eater bot, they're like way more tanky than everything else. But anyways, very low thought process in terms of like thinking about aiming or anything like that. It's a massive AoE radius, and then shoots down lightning. I just think it's a cool skill. I like it a lot so far from my testing with it. The one thing it lacks is single target is definitely one of the lower skills in the game. So it's one of those things where I'd use it if I was just like doing map clearing, and then the second I went to do a bossing, like if I wanted to do some boss rushing, I'd probably swap it over to a higher damage skill. Ultimately, the highest damage skill you're gonna have access to is going to be probably Frost Nova of Ice Bolts plus Frostbolt or whatever, that combo skill, which you could put on this character just like any other. There's a reason it's popular. It's because you get so many freaking hits out of that combination. It's a little bit unreal. But I just like this Lighting Combo of the Heavens just because it's a pretty feels good skill in terms of like random targeting of enemies. I'll showcase the single targets a little bit more sketch with the skill over some others, but it's probably still like acceptably decent, right? We're still killing Hydra in a couple of seconds of DPSing him. It's not like the end of the world. Yeah, it's fine. So it still does fine damage. Obviously, you're still going to be able to map with it. I would just say if you're going to start doing more bossing specific stuff, like you want to do Ubers, if you want to take this character and you really want to start dealing a lot of damage, then you just do the combo of the Ice Nova Frostbolts plus Frostbolt. Anyways, this is the Rage Mage. I have to say I like this. Forget to. Oh, I didn't do that. I forgot to turn back on my... Basically, this is automating my Arcane Cloak and my Berserk. I forgot to turn it on, so I was missing a bunch of extra speed and extra damage and defense, but whatever. Anyways, you get the idea of the character. Hopefully, I showcased it well enough. Pretty much, you can... This is another scenario where you can pick pretty much almost any skill you want or like. I like Shock Nova. I think that looks pretty fun. It has good AoE. It's decent damage. I like Lightning Conduit of the Heavens. Targets super smooth. Feels good to play. There's a lot of great options. Frostbolt of Novas, Ice Nova, Frostbolt, or whatever. That is crazy single target. But this is the Rage Mage. This is how I set it up. I enjoyed this character, but I'm ready to make some other builds I have in my head. I think the next project I'm going to take on is I want to try to make a Wraith Lord build. It just sounds like something fun to do, and Wraith Lord is tanked in price. It's almost down to... It might be close to 1 div now, which I think that item looks like a lot of fun. I might try out some of the new Spectres. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care, and peace out.